Let's do it, Catch.
We're back. It's another edition of the Orangebloods YouTube football channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined today by Anwar Richardson. And we're keeping this one simple today as we get closer to the Texas spring game, which will take place on Saturday. By the way, jump over to orangebloods.com. Subscribe to Orangebloods if you haven't already. And oh, by the way, the channel that we've started is new, so give us a subscribe. And if you like the video, I feel like I'm one of the twins or the new trend or whatever those kids are. Like, make sure you like that video, like it, hit that button at the bottom, but definitely subscribe. We're going to be doing more of these like on a daily basis moving forward. So trying to tap into a new audience. We hope you guys enjoy these as we bring the Texas football conversation to YouTube. Anwar Bijan Robinson is a conversation piece at the moment for us. And I think the big question that I think a lot of Texas fans have is, what are the proper expectations for Bijan Robinson going into year two, coming off of the way he ended season one? And what exactly do the Longhorns have as a building block for Steve Sarkisian in this offense in Bijan Robinson? The answer to that question could really tell us a lot about what kind of season I think the Longhorns are going to have. If he's at the very top of the running back food chain and can produce like that, we're talking about a player that can carry this offense potentially to really big heights. If we're putting too much too soon on this kid's shoulders, it might. His evolution may prove to be similar to the Sarkisian regime, right? Which maybe they're a year away. Maybe they need a build-up year. It's a lot of pressure, but I think that like Sarkisian, I think Bijan is embracing these expectations. And whatever it is that we think of him, they can't be higher than the expectations he already has for himself.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, Catch. He has Heisman odds. I mean, like you can find something online and say, hey, go ahead and put some money on Bijan. So that tells you in itself that there's expectations outside of the 40 acres as to what he may or may not do. What's the fascinating part about it, Catch, is that we're basing this really off of a couple of games, right? I mean, we're really basing it off of what he did in the last couple of, like, was it K-State in the bowl game, where it's this fascinating thing where we were all saying, like, man, that guy needs to get more touches. That guy needs to see the ball more often. And we kept hearing why he shouldn't get the ball more often. We kept hearing that, well, he fumbled early in the season. And then, of course, what happened? Of course, we had the TCU fumble followed by the Oklahoma fumble. And so at that point, you're saying, well, what are you really holding him back for? And then, of course, Keontae gets injured. And then, all right, well, then they have to use him. And then what happens? The guy basically on 10 carries, Catch, in each game, basically on 10 carries, rushes for nearly 200 yards. Unbelievable. And so the thought process, Catch, about what his success could be is, look, if Steve Sarkisian feeds Bijan the way he fed Najee, for instance, at Alabama, then all of a sudden you're talking about beast mode. You're talking about something special. And so that's what we believe, what he could potentially be. What's interesting, though, Catch, is we keep hearing a little bit from Sarkisian about Roschon and how much they like Roschon. And so what we're thinking, like, Bijan gets 20 plus carries a game, 25, whatever that case may be. We're starting to see, like, well, does Roschon cut into that a little bit? How does that look? So the sky's the limit as far as what he can do. Upside, it's just going to be how they decide to use him, I think, when it's all said and done.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, because I think the offense, with a new quarterback, with unproven wide receivers, with a left tackle situation that's less than ideal going into the spring game, let alone the season, this is a team that I think is going to lean on the running back position more. When we think about the Alabama offense from a year ago, it's hard not to think about what they did in the passing game. It's hard not to think about Mac Jones and a receiving unit where they lose Jalen Waddle, and you just never could tell. It didn't matter that they lost a first-round draft pick at wide receiver. It was like, next first rounder up. And so the offense that I dream about, Sarkisian, a rival, like it's going to take place where that kind of Star Wars, like everything about it, that fireworks show. Texas won't be that in year one, but Bijan might be. He might be the kind of a guy, and it really makes you wonder. When they talk about Roschon, it really makes me wonder, are we talking a 60-40 offense? Everybody talks about 50-50, and maybe it's probably close. It's hard for me to think they'd be 60-40 running versus pass football, but I think it's been 60-40 the other way, and coaches are always trying to get to 50. That they throw the ball so much they have to remember to run the ball sometimes. And that was certainly a problem under Tom Herman, where they would get – we saw it with Bijan Robinson. He'd get hot, and then 2 quarters would go by before he would get another touch. And you would think to yourself, what are they doing? And I don't think we're going to have that issue under Sarkisian, where he just forgets about his best player for – an hour and a half of real time.
Yeah.
But what does it mean in the grand scheme of things? I think the spring game is a chance for us just to see what it looks like with our own eyes. Use some in the passing game. Maybe we don't get out of that in the spring game, but I think the fact that 2 of their 3 most known, and I don't want to say established, because I don't know that we could call Jordan Whittington that, but there's a holy trinity of skill guys it feels like they feel good about, with Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, and Jordan Whittington. 2 of those guys are running backs. And it really makes me wonder what the offense looks like in a world where your 2 best offensive players are your running backs. If we find ourselves in October talking about a game plan where Bijan and Roschon aren't getting touches, it'd be even more mind-blowing than what we witnessed a year ago, because this staff is supposed to be smarter and better than that.
Here's the thing. So I pulled it up because I wrote something on Orangebloods, and you can tell everyone about the promos at the end of it. But I wrote something a couple of weeks talking about maybe the potential running back battle, right? So I just pulled this thing up. And in that column, I wrote, in 2020, okay, Ketch, Najee had 251 carries. Brian Robinson Jr. had 91. Okay. In 2019, Najee had 209 carries and Brian Robinson had 96. Okay. I went back to look at the NFL, and NFL is a little bit different, because you kind of can see a little bit. There's not always a bell cow in the NFL, but even in 2018 with the Atlanta Falcons, Tevin Coleman had 167. Ito Smith had 90. The really interesting one, like, okay, this is not the really interesting one. The one that this Justin Davis and Ronald Jones had 169 and 153 respectively at USC. But when he has the bell cow, like go back to Washington, when he had Bishop Sankey catch, 2013, Bishop Sankey had 327 carries. The next guy had 48. In 2012, Bishop Sankey had 289 carries. The next guy had 29. And so in 2011, Chris Polk had 293 carries. The next person had 47. The last 2 I'll give you, Chris Polk, 260, and the next person, 77 in 2010. Chris Polk, this is the best one, 226. And then Demetrius Bronson had 19. So Sarkisian's record states, like, if we just go off his past, when he finds his guy, that's his guy. That's who he goes to.
Especially as a head coach.
Yes, that's been his MO. So when we hear about the Roschon thing, I'm like, I hear what you're saying, but then does that fall a little bit more into, the Brian Robinson? Is that what we're talking about? Is it we're talking about one guy is getting 250, the other guy is getting 90? Because his history suggests when he's got his guy, that's his guy.
Numbers from his head coaching days at Washington are really interesting. I don't want to say that this job is more like the Washington job than what he's had at Alabama, because those Washington teams were winless when he showed up and they were really building from the ground up. But it's not Alabama either. So somewhere in between Alabama and those Washington offenses is this Texas offense. And I think it's really interesting that he has a really large sample size of committing to the running backs. It's kind of funny to me that Bijan is a 5-star running back prospect, right? So he arrives with all of the hype that a running back could have. So this is what was expected of him in some ways when he signed. But through the first 6 games of last year, he not only was he not getting the ball, and not only was he not really producing, and not only was he injured during the scorpion play or whatever it is that we've nicknamed that what could have been catastrophic injury. Like, I watched that when it happened and thought to myself, I've never seen a play where I thought someone could die on the field. When you see the frozen snapshots of what that looked like, and like that to me thought, seriously, like I had that thought, like that was really scary. But even if you eliminate all of that, Bijan didn't really flash like a big time, like the guy we're talking about now. It was really slow to materialize. And I have to admit, I had some doubt, because we've seen the Jonathan Grays of the world come in as a 5-star running back and immediately not play like a 5-star running back. And even Malcolm Brown, who's had a really nice NFL career and just signed a nice contract with the Dolphins and has a Super Bowl ring, like, or has played in that game. Anyway, we talk about a situation where even he, when he showed up at Texas and had a good career, he never emerged as that guy. And there was about a halfway point through the season last year when I wondered if, okay, maybe this guy's not Adrian Peterson. Maybe he's not Jamal Charles. Maybe he's closer to Jonathan Gray and Malcolm Brown, which wouldn't be a terrible thing, but it also might mean this program doesn't have a true and outright difference maker. It is amazing what happened in just a couple of those games, which have completely reformed a narrative for Bijan that might have sounded quite different if those games hadn't have happened and the end of the season had looked a lot more like the first 2/3 of the season.
Well, it's 2 games essentially. Like, I mean, if you want to throw the West Virginia game in there, that's fine. He had 12 for 113. So, but in 3
that definitely counts.
Okay, so in 3 out of his last 4, he rushed for over 100. Right. I mean, yes. That's essentially what we're saying. 3 out of his last 4. Now, Iowa State was 16 for 54 during that loss, but Kansas State was 9 for $172, averaging 19 yards a carry. And Colorado was 10 for 183, averaging 18.3. So it's 3 out of 4 where you said, okay, first of all, everything we thought to be about this guy now is probably true. He definitely needed a little bit more touches, because look, to be fair to him, UTEP was 5 touches. Texas Tech was 4 touches. Oklahoma was 5 touches. Then it gets to Baylor. He gets 12. Oklahoma State is, so then you're hitting that, Baylor 12 for 55. Oklahoma State 13 for 59. And you're like, it's okay. But, you're talking about yards per carry. Baylor was 4.6. Oklahoma State was 4.5.
It's just okay. That's okay.
It's okay. And then West Virginia happened, and then all of a sudden you started seeing it, and then you started seeing the momentum, and now you're building. So now here we are in the spring, Catch, and we want to see if we still see that same guy. We saw a clip of him on the Texas sports thing, or whoever put it out on Twitter, and it was like, oh snap, there's Bijan, look at him go. And so there's that excitement about him and what he might be able to do, to your point, Catch. And what can he do if someone says, you know what, I know this guy's name, I know this guy's number, let's feed him. And do what the other programs do that we've seen all the time. I mean, at the end of the day, Mike Gundy, he don't have any problem feeding his running backs. I mean, you look over the past few years, Mike Gundy running backs to get 300 damn carries, and he don't give a damn. You know, Oklahoma doesn't have a problem feeding their guys and feeding the beast. If that's their guy, that's their guy. Texas has been this weird thing where it's, let's use them both. Let's kind of split it. But we're looking at, hey, Sarkisian, if you go ahead and do what you've done, then you have a fantastic run game. And then you get to what you want to be, which is competing for the Big 12 championship. So we'll see. We'll get a little more glimpse of it potentially on Saturday, Catch.
The running game carries have been like participation trophies, right? Like everybody's got to get one because I don't know. Like it's been weird. It's been weird how evenly the snap distribution and the carries have been among running backs for really the last few years. I mean,
hell, go back to Catch. Go back to you know what I'm going to say.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Chris Warren and Deontay Foreman.
It took the Chris Warren injury. I mean, our brains are on the same wavelength because Deontay Foreman has that monster season that actually in the end may have been more. That may have not have been the best thing that could have been for his overall growth as a player. You know, if Chris Warren stays healthy and they split the carries like they had in the early part of that season, first game of the season, Deontay Foreman's not an All-American, right? But he also doesn't leave school early. And maybe he's in the NFL right now if he just bakes in the oven a little bit longer as a college player. But that whole thing happened because of an injury, not because they decided they were going to lean on Deontay Foreman in a way that they otherwise hadn't. You know, that's, I guess the conversation we're kind of having is it going to take that, right? Like,
what is it last year?
Is Bijan Robinson going to have 1,800 yards rushing because the activity he receives allows him to do that? Or is he a guy that's closer to 1,200 yards or 1,000 yards, but Texas has two running backs that combine for, let's say, 2,000 yards of offense? I think it will be weighted way more towards Bijan getting. I think he'll have at least two times as many touches in every capacity as Bijan or as Roschon this year, barring injury. So as we wrap things up on this Bijan Robinson conversation here on our Orangebloods football talking channel on YouTube, let's get some April predictions out of the way. All right. I'm going to put you on the spot. Buy or sell.
Oh boy.
I'm going to start small. Bijan Robinson, 800 yards rushing this season.
Buy.
Bijan Robinson, 1,000 yards rushing this season.
Buy.
Bijan Robinson, 1,300 yards rushing this season.
Sell.
So if I'd said 1,200.
1,200, I'd probably buy. Now, you know, now because at 1,200, we're averaging about 100 a game, right? You know, during the regular season, feasible highs and lows, right? But overall, I'm not quite sure. Bijan, I can't go to this guy's gonna rush for 1,800 yards thing. Like I'm not there. I'm not saying he doesn't have the ability. I'm just saying today in April, that's a huge ask based off a 3-game sample size. So that's why I'm like, I'll put him in right now, like the 1,200 category, you know, maybe 15 touchdowns, you know, 16 touchdowns, something to that effect. That's where I feel comfortable.
If I told you today, because we've had this conversation on our Orangebloods modcast over at theyak.com. If you haven't listened to our podcast, we do them weekly on Thursdays. And one of the big conversations that we've had are expectations for this team in this season with some of the personnel issues that they have. If I tell you nothing else, because we did this with Sam Ehlinger, right? If I told you last year, I think the conversation was, you know, if I could rattle off some stats, or I told you he was going to be first team all Big 12 quarterback, what would that tell you about the team? I'm going to kind of do this. We'll end it with this exercise. If I tell you now, with nothing else known about this football team other than Bijan Robinson finishes with 1,600 yards rushing and almost 2,000 yards of offense. What does that make you think about what happens to this team if he has that kind of season?
This team won the Big 12 championship, because at that point you're running, you're not behind, right? So it's not like you're forced to pass the ball a ton. That means you're going into the fourth quarter with leads and you're pounding teams in the fourth quarter, second half. That to me means that they're not playing from behind. This is not Texas versus Texas Tech, where you're having a haul and just throw the ball to try to get back into the game, or all the fourth quarter comebacks that Texas had last year. That doesn't necessarily lend towards a running game because they fell behind. So if you're telling me that stat line, Texas won a Big 12 championship, that's what I would think.
I don't disagree with you. I'll only point to the fact that Foreman had that big year and got his coach fired.
Well,
so the two things don't always correlate, right? But I agree with you. If you tell me that Bijan has those types of numbers right now, it weirdly, or his Foreman had those numbers on a desperate Texas team, it would make me think, okay, the Sark offense is taking off, and Bijan's explosion is evidence of that. And I don't know if they win the Big 12, but they're in the Big 12 championship game if he has that type of season. And then over 60 minutes against Oklahoma, I don't know. I'm assuming it would be Oklahoma, but yeah, I'm with you. That's where if you tell me that, I think Texas has a better season than I think I'm projecting them to have. And I think it's probably because you and I both are like, Bijan's probably closer to the 1,200, 1,250 mark than the 1,600 yard mark.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question real quick before we go.
Yeah.
If I say Bijan is somewhere in that 1,200 mark and Roschon is around 700, 650 to 700, that doesn't move you.
It doesn't move me. I know what you're doing, right? But
because I put you at nearly 2,000 yards of rushing offense.
Because I think ultimately, I think Roschon's like a 500. I think Roschon's going to rush for about 500 yards.
Okay.
And so the issue is, does it get? I can't imagine a world where Roschon rushes for 800 yards unless Bijan gets hurt and Roschon has to carry the offense for a few games, at which point I could see a season where it's closer to 1,000 or 1,100 yards. And then the two combined is two. I think the two of them probably are going to be good for about 1,700 yards. If they can get that extra 300, 400 yards combined, that really gets them to 2,000 total, then if you tell me those two guys combined for 2,000 yards of offense, I think that would probably make me think Texas is playing in the Big 12 championship game.
Okay.
But it's hard for me to see a 1,200, 800 split. I think it will take Bijan being great to get that running game to that level.
Fair enough. I just wanted to throw you threw one at me. I wanted to throw one right back at you before we close out.
All right, look, we're going to continue our Orangebloods YouTube series of videos all week long, really forever moving forward, right? So you can expect more of these videos. Subscribe to this channel. Like this video. We will be back for more. Our next video, we'll turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball. We've done some quarterback and running back discussion. Maybe it's time to have a David Benda discussion because he's the linebacker that's been generating a lot of buzz. Maybe it's enough buzz for us to do a YouTube video. You guys stay tuned. Like I said, subscribe to this channel. We'll be back shortly. Maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. It will be shortly. Thank you. We'll see you next time.